Prime Minister Scott Morrison says Australia is doing everything it can to protect Australians from the coronavirus outbreak. Scott Morrison has come under criticism from the Queensland Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk over his handling of the health emergency. Our political reporter Stephanie Boris reports.
Well, Prime Minister Scott Morrison is in a National Security Committee of Cabinet meeting today, talking with his senior colleagues and medical experts about what more Australia can do to protect itself against this coronavirus. Now, ahead of going into that meeting, Scott Morrison did his best to reassure Australians that everything is being done not only to stop the spread of this virus, but also to protect Australians from getting too sick, as we heard there from Sophie. None of the Australian citizens that are currently contracted this virus are in intensive care. They are more milder conditions. Mr Morrison saying that, in fact, the medical experts here in Australia did predict that the World Health Organization would declare this as a global health emergency. And in preparation for that, Australia actually put in a number of measures that the WHO today has asked all countries to abide by, such as the self-isolation of 14 days if coming back from areas of China, also tracking down anyone that has been in contact with those people that have contracted coronavirus. Mr Morrison saying that it is very much a coordinated response between state and federal governments and also medical authorities.
All of the issues: isolation, case management, contact tracing, prevention of onward spread, active surveillance, early detection, all of these things are the things that Australia has been doing, will continue to do as we work together to ensure we contain and address any impact to Australian health and well-being. Border isolation, surveillance, all of these things are already in place.
There's still no timeline on exactly when that will occur. When this was first announced, this plan, the Prime Minister did indicate that there's no promise it will go ahead, because in the end it is up to the Chinese government to decide whether it will allow that Qantas chartered flight into Wuhan, which is in lockdown because of the coronavirus, and whether the Chinese government will allow it to leave. We know that there are about 600 Australian citizens in Wuhan and surrounding cities. DFAT is in touch with them, finding out if they'd like a seat on this plane that plans to come back to Australia. With those people then on that flight, they will have to go to Christmas Island for 14 days of quarantine to ensure they don't have the virus before they're allowed to go back to their own home. Well, very much the preparations are underway. I think that shows that the government does believe that it will be able to get this chartered flight operation underway at some stage. So we've learnt today that a medical team is already on its way to Christmas Island. They're also taking a range of medical equipment, so much so that if there was someone to end up being in a critical condition on Christmas Island, the government insists that they would be able to cope with it on the island. Federal Health Minister Greg Hunt says the team will be ready to go by the weekend.
I can confirm now that today the first of the AUSMAT, or Australian Medical Assistance Team, pre-deployment personnel will arrive on Christmas Island. I have spoken with the Director of the National Critical Care and Trauma Centre, Len Nataris, this morning, and he has confirmed that they have a team of 24, and the first members of those, the pre-deployment and logistical personnel, will arrive today, and they will include significant medical equipment. It will be a deployable hospital, which will include a negative pressure room and isolation capacities and critical care capacity if required.
Well, Queensland Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk says that the federal government isn't sharing enough information about the coronavirus, and she's calling on more cooperation between the federal and state governments. The federal government argues that it is holding regular communications between the various states, both at a medical and government level. However, opposition leader Anthony Albanese says he understands Anastasia Palaszczuk's concerns.
I reiterate her concerns. They're legitimate. We, myself and Chris Bowen, our health spokesperson, have been very mindful to not try and politicise what the World Health Organization has now called a global emergency. But we need a national response to this issue.
Now, some good news today that 2 of the confirmed coronavirus cases in Australia, 2 people have been released from medical care and are very much on their way to recovery.